Today, we're really here to learn about Orly and Chartbeat. I'm Lucas, your host as always, and I want to welcome you guys, business owners, directors, and marketeers to today's show. And we have a very special guest today who heads up a marketing team at Chartbeat, who holds several hats in the team there. And we're going to be really talking about also a marketing ops side of things, which tooling is being really required if you want to have your operations run smoothly. So Orly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. A joy to be here. I'm a big fan, and I've actually taken a lot away from previous Path Monk Present podcast. So hopefully I can impart similar wisdom on other listeners.
Really, really cool. Give us, one or two sentence rundown. Who are you and what are you doing?
Yeah, so Lucas really cut to the chase there, but as you said, I run marketing with a specific focus on demand generation and operations at Chartbeat. The quick one-liner before Chartbeat is I've worn a lot of different hats, some in marketing, some in other capacities, throughout a few different industries. I started all the way back in retail, if you can believe it, as a buyer for Macy's, which is pretty different from where I'm at right now, but slowly used retail and e-commerce as a way to get deeper into technology. And from there, went even deeper into tech, into ad tech. And from there, actually decided to look at the other side of the publisher equation, moving into Chartbeat. And I think that's probably a nice transition into what is Chartbeat for those of you who don't know what we are. We're a content analytics platform, and we work with some of the world's leading publishers and content creators to understand how their audiences are engaging with the content that they create and publish, creating kind of an organic feedback loop so they can take action on those insights. We offer a pretty robust suite of tools. On the reporting side, we offer real-time and historical dashboards and reports that can be customized, as well as optimization tools like headline testing or on-site visualizations that help folks who are creating and distributing that content understand how to take insights from real-time data and take immediate action to continue to grow and deepen engagement with their users or their readers, so on and so forth. And it's been a pretty wild road for Chartbeat, and we're currently working with about 700 global media organizations. Just to put that into daily traffic numbers, we see about 50 billion page view impressions across our network on a monthly basis.
Wow.
And we work with publishers and content creators in about, I think we just hit 78 countries globally. So you can imagine we get a pretty cool bird's eye view and perspective on the global state of reader engagement and content consumption. So it makes the day job pretty fascinating.
Very, very interesting, and especially that you sort of are able to collect sort of those insights across the industry. What I'm very curious about, who would be the people using Chartbeat? Like a typical use case, maybe somebody listening, if they're wondering, is that something for me? Can it help my organization? Who would be the typical types of companies, and even which people in these companies are actually, are the champions for Chartbeat?
Two very astute questions. So Chartbeat was actually born and bred for what we call the editorial use case. So if you think about major newsrooms and the editors and journalists that are creating content on really an hourly, minute by minute basis, right? It's really critical to their job to understand how their readers are engaging in that moment, second by second, so they can take that information and iterate and continue to do a better job at everything that they're trying to accomplish on a second-by-second basis. So initially, our real-time dashboard was our primary product, 10 years ago, for that editorial use case. Fast forward 11 years, and I can't believe I'm saying that, we've been around for a minute. The actual end users within those large media organizations has diversified, right? As media has changed as an industry, the organizations in that industry have changed and evolved as well. And the data behind content is more and more critical to more disciplines and functions throughout an organization. So if originally it was really the editor-in-chief or the homepage editor that was looking at Chartbeat on an hourly basis, if not minute by minute, now you see marketing teams wanting that data, right? Or audience engagement teams or analysts, right? Because it really paints a full business perspective when content is so critical to that business model. Beyond the end user diversifying, what's been wild is to watch the world of content diversify as well, right? What we used to think about as the traditional publisher was, some of our customers like the BBC or the New York Times, right? But now we're seeing everyone can be a publisher, and content is so critical to any business model, whether it's an e-commerce platform, right? Or a D2C brand or a nonprofit. They're trying to find ways to connect with their audiences and convey a story, a message, right? And really create that feedback loop where they understand how that message is connecting with that audience, and to learn from it, to grow their business across the board. So beyond just the end user diversifying, we're actually seeing a whole host of new companies that we used to think were outside of our, let's call it ICP, right, our ideal customer profile, really seeing many use cases. So in terms of the folks that are listening right now, right, if you're a marketer, if you're the head of content marketing, you're trying to figure out how to get the most out of your content, how to hopefully avoid diminishing returns, but you realize that content plays a really big role for your organization, I would definitely give us a call.
Very good, very good. I think people get a good understanding of what they can be achieving now with the platform. I'm curious though, what you mentioned specifically as you being a marketer for Chartbeat, you mentioned the diversification of, personas or people that are using a Chartbeat, from an editor to, somebody in the marketing teams. You mentioned the companies are diversifying. How would you then describe that people find Chartbeat? How do they discover? What's the customer journey or the user journey like, or the channels, if you want it that way, that they would be going through to identify Chartbeat to be a good solution?
Yeah, it's a great question. So these are numbers I look at all the time because I'm constantly trying to make sure I have a good sense of where we can go next. What has been most astonishing to me, and very much a credit to the Chartbeat brand, is over 70% of our business comes from inbound. And by inbound, I mean, someone searching for a keyword that links to our homepage, right? Someone finding us direct, which again is all brand equity there, and coming through any of our organic channels that direct them right back to our website where they can contact us directly or ask for a free demo. That's an astoundingly high number, especially for a company that's been around for 10 years, right? And I think it is because we got in really early. We were the first company to bring real-time analytics to the media industry. And I think that being kind of first to market really sets you up for success on the inbound side. But beyond inbound, our second most, I'd say, traffic channel is events. The in-person events, which is a really different channel from inbound through digital. And for us, events play a really critical role in terms of getting not only our brand out there, but our people out there. Because we deal with such a wide book of business, right, and all of our prospects live all over the globe, sometimes the best way to create that first impression, and not only create a first impression, but move folks down the funnel more quickly, is by building confidence in the people behind the brand, and events have been huge for that. And I know this isn't exactly our focus today, but it's also been huge for go-to-market strategy, right? When we're introducing new products, being there in person and getting feedback, as well as managing our customer base, which is all over the world. And if we were trying to manage out of our tiny office in New York City, it would mean folks would be traveling 500 days a year, which is actually impossible. So events have been huge. Other channels worth noting, customer referrals are our favorite, because it means that people are so happy with the product, they want other people to use it and think that others would benefit from it. And another similar vein is when Chartbeat champions at a customer organization move on to a new organization and they bring Chartbeat with them. It just reflects really well internally here, and it boosts morale. It's really fun to see. I think it's worth noting also that outbound's not a huge part of our strategy. We've spun it up a few times, and what we see is that it doesn't actually get the results that validate the investment. So we're actually choosing to invest a little bit more in organic channels as well as some of the inbound channels. That's not to say paid media doesn't have its place, right? I think for us, things like paid media do drive a little bit of the inbound, but ultimately are more of a brand play than a demand gen play. And I think that those are two really different strategies that if you're thinking about channels, you should really make sure you understand what your objective is with that channel, because if LinkedIn might be a great channel from a brand perspective and you want to optimize for maybe overall exposure, you might get a little disappointed if you look at conversion rates, right? So I would just caution folks that channels are probably great for different end goals, and think about the end goals before you invest, because depending on how you measure success, it might paint a different picture.
Very, very interesting. One small follow-up question on that, because you mentioned that around 70% coming through inbound. Could you give us a summary of, how would you describe the inbound strategy, for folks who are sort of building up their inbound strategy and are maybe looking for good examples? Maybe what are some key pillars or key actions that you guys are doing that they potentially could have a look at?
Yeah, definitely. And I have to give all of the kudos to my content marketing team. So in the past year, our content marketing team has put a really big focus on search engine optimization.
Mhm.
So I think that is so key if you want folks to find you, right? And for all of you who know that you have a really amazing product or a really amazing brand and exposure, I would say make sure you're doing everything. And the basics sometimes make a huge difference for us. Just looking at things like meta tags on a page, right, are huge if you want to index against specific keywords. If you have somebody that's running content strategy, make sure that they build out a keyword strategy that is the foundation of that content, right? And make sure everything is centered on that stuff. Even some of the basics like backlinks, right, and internal linking can make a huge difference in how you index. I mean, I think one of the things all marketers continue to try and figure out, but no, we never will, is how algorithms work, right, at the end of the day. And they always seem to change just when we got them figured out, right? And that is one of the challenges, but also the exciting aspects of being a marketer is you kind of always have to figure out how to keep it fresh. But I think that's actually the point, right? For inbound or specifically, SEO in particular, staying on top of it and not setting it and forgetting it, right? You might say, oh, we changed our meta tags, 6 months ago, and we feel really good about our keyword strategy. Have you checked on what that keyword traffic looks like recently? There are so many tools we use to just get that reference point and make sure that we're staying relevant with all of those components, And I think beyond that, there are a few other things you can do in terms of raising the brand. I think co-marketing, honestly, can also raise your organic awareness, so to speak, depending on, if you're collaborating with other brands that actually resonate more in the market. Those are just a few tactics I might take.
Got you. Really, really good. One thing I think that sort of the next question really ties nicely into what you were just describing, because I had a lot of conversation with marketeers and also, for that matter, SaaS founders who were sort of, focusing heavily on inbound. But then there's another sort of, challenge emerging, which is, qualification. And since you're holding that operational marketing head, from an operational side, I would be just curious, how do you think about, qualification, the process, things that are being required? Maybe you can give us an overview. How you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, qualification can look a lot of different ways. And some people have really complex weighting systems where
Mm-hmm.
qualification is not just based on the organizational persona or the user persona, right? Those are 2 data points, but also the degree of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we like to keep it a little simple.
Mm-hmm.
And we essentially look at a few basic components, the 2 I mentioned. So first, organizational persona.
Mm-hmm.
Would this company benefit from Chartbeat, right? We definitely don't want to be hard selling somebody who doesn't have a great use case. We obviously want to hear why they came inbound, but we don't want to, go too aggressive on them. The next is the end user, right? Is this role someone that would benefit from Chartbeat? This is not a yes or no binary. If they fit the right persona, we take the call, and if they don't, they don't. It's just additional data for us to prioritize accordingly. The third is what we call sales ready or not, and that's really a reflection on the channel through which they came inbound. If they downloaded a white paper, they're probably not interested in someone calling them for the next 3 days asking to set up a sales call. They're probably just genuinely interested in what we're sharing from our metadata perspective. So it's more, sales ready or not. Those are the 3 main, I would say, parameters. Beyond that, we typically take a lead and we enrich a little bit of data around how much traffic they have on a monthly basis, because for Chartbeat, that's really important in terms of getting the best use out of our product. Beyond that, honestly, we really just take those calls and then understand the need and the problems they're trying to solve on their end to continue to qualify it in a bit more of an abstract way. But those are the first steps that we take. And we've actually set up some systems to automatically add those values so that our folks on the front line who have to sift through these leads don't need to go into each and every one of them manually and ask themselves those questions.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I would like to dig deep there a little bit deeper, since you're having the operational head there already. How would you describe your, qualification setup, and maybe what do you think where is some gaps, or where would you, if would have a magic stick, what would you like to even improve?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there are not enough magic sticks out there for all of us marketers, but I'm really proud of where we've come from an operational standpoint. Salesforce is the backbone of pretty much everything we do operationally. I hate to be a walking salesperson for Salesforce, because Lord knows they have enough. But I would say if you do use a CRM that is flexible, you might not realize how much it can do on its own without plugging in all the other systems of data out there. And we're lucky enough to have really a technical business operations guru on our team who has taken our Salesforce instance from okay to really fantastic and doing a lot of the work that some previous tools we had used to do for us. So if you do have a CRM and someone that can manage it effectively, I would start to maybe look under the surface and see if there's anything it could do for you. Just to walk you through what we've built so far, and again, I'm sure it can get more sophisticated, is every time a lead comes inbound, we actually have the ability to map that channel directly into Salesforce. We've set up essentially, an algorithm to the effect of the word where that then plugs into, is this channel meet X and Y requirements? Does this mean that they're sales ready, right? If they filled out a contact form, they're likely to be marked as sales ready in Salesforce based on where it's ingesting that information from. Yep. So the ability to ingest that information and set up some rules that then answers those questions for us is really the first step. We do plug in additional data from a company called SimilarWeb, and they're a website scraping platform. So they essentially can give us some of that data around how many page views are we seeing to really qualify the size of that publisher from a Chartbeat perspective. Beyond that point, once we actually decide, are they a qualified lead or not, we've also set up a workflow by which we can move them into a specific state in Salesforce, and with a little bit of manual steps in between, put them into a specific cadence and outreach. So we use outreach.io with our sales team to create automatic drip cadences, depending on whether they're high qualified or not. We tailor up the content, but we also have a component where if they're a super high priority lead, where we have our own kind of internal qualifications for that, we check a box in Salesforce that notifies a specific rep on the sales side and actually assigns them to specific tasks that are a bit more manual. Give them a call, send a sales nav LinkedIn message, and then we make sure that we report on all those metrics. So I actually have a weekly meeting with our head of sales. We look through all the tasks, we look through all the leads, and make sure that all of the actions have been completed, and anywhere where they haven't been completed, see if we can help out.
Very, very cool. That's I'm really, really glad you sort of can break that down sort of step by step here for people to really understand. One thing that you would wanted to improve, what would be a thing that you would wanted to improve about the process and in qualification in general? What is nagging you?
And I think that sometimes we get drop off when we ask the qualifying questions, because if you come to our website, you'll see we have a chatbot. I'm sure a lot of marketers listening have a chatbot, right? And I think what's still kind of frustrating is a lot of folks will start filling the questions out, and we try and pare them down to as few as we can, right? The basics, where can we reach you? What company are you coming from? And we get a 0.3 conversion rate on those questions. Super low, right? We see a lot of drop off mid questions. What we don't have is access to the data of who that person was to go out and ask them to kind of complete that cycle. So there is this gap where we're getting a lot of leads to come to the site, but on-site conversion is an area that I think, there's a lot of technology out there to try and get that. There are a lot of data providers. We haven't bit the bullet just yet, because the costs are pretty high and we want to make sure we can build it effectively into a process, but that's the biggest gap I'm seeing right now for us.
Very, very interesting. I was actually sort of leaning into the next question, which would be a little bit about sort of conversion on the side. How are you thinking about that? What have you been trying? What has been helping you? What you've been learning personally, even about being able to improve conversions on the side?
Yeah, it's a great question. Another one that I'm partnering with content marketing on tremendously. What we're trying to do is get a sense of how engaged folks are on our site, right? So a tool like Chartbeat, really helpful to understand that, right? And what are the on-site prompts we can create based on engagement levels. Because it's great to have a chatbot, but folks are coming for different reasons. Maybe we need to diversify that playbook. So two things that we're working on right now are those two exact things, right? Diversifying our conversational marketing strategy. For folks that have used chatbots, there is an automated aspect to it, but you can also loop it into your sales team's process. So if you have enough available folks, you can actually loop a rep into a live chat conversation, and we've seen much better responses the few times we actually have been able to coerce a sales rep to make themselves available to do that. But beyond that, diversifying playbooks, we've been working with a CSM at Drift who's helping navigate, this is how you should approach it on more of a sales prone page versus product. And in terms of the second flow, how can we activate triggers on site based on engagement? We use HubSpot for our blog specifically. Our blog sees a ton of traffic, just given the nature of the content we're putting out there. And we actually see a lot of what in Chartbeat terms we call recirculation, which means someone comes from one page and goes deeper and deeper into the next. So what we're trying to do is engineer ways to thoughtfully engage the folks that are clearly seeing value out of the content we're providing and take them one step deeper into the funnel.
Got you. And how are you thinking about, maybe last follow-up question on that one, how are you thinking about, you mentioned those prompts, like what do you think, or maybe what are you trying to achieve with those, prompts? What way are you trying to realize that? What's your, so it seems to be the one thing that you're working on, one of the things that you're working on at the moment. What do you have in mind for, this engagement on page?
Yeah, definitely. The idea is to get them one step further down the funnel. I think sometimes you feel like you're at a limit in terms of how many cards you can play as a marketer, right? Either you're like really top of funnel and it's all about leadership, or you're asking them to the sales call. For us, we're going to experiment, and this is literally in the works right now, and I feel like my content marketing team hasn't even heard these ideas from me, so you're actually giving me a good reason to go back and have a chat with them. But I think experimenting with a few different ways to engage them one step deeper, right? Hey, it sounds like you really like the content we're serving out. We actually send it out weekly in a newsletter. Would you like to sign up for that newsletter, right? Not necessarily throwing out the, hey, we'd love to get on the sales call and understand your problems, but going one step deeper where we then get them in our community, right? We have a new way to connect with them, and we can keep on serving them what they clearly indicate as valuable content.
Very, very cool. And just for my understanding, in terms of analysis about this, you're using primarily sort of Chartbeat, it sounded like, or using a suite of analysis tools? How should I understand that? Are you keeping an overview of all of those things that are happening that we just walked through?
Yeah, it is a little hard to connect all the dots at the end of the day. So we are actually engineering it through HubSpot specifically, because HubSpot can respond to that engagement on site with those prompts. We look to Chartbeat to get a much bigger perspective on what's happening with general traffic across the board, right? Where are people actually coming to? Are they recirculating through different pages across the board? And then interpret that data and try and take action through some of the tools that are actually plugged into the foundation of our owned and operated site.
Very, very cool. Very, very insightful. One thing is, maybe would just, since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and learn about you as a person a little bit. You've shared so much, interesting insights from what you guys are doing at Chartbeat. So I would be curious about you personally. How would you describe your goal? I don't know, maybe for the next quarter, if your goals are going quarterly, like, what is sort of, your main focus?
Yeah, so I think my team's actually a fairly new team in terms of the very specific focus on demand gen and ops. And I think what we've been able to do in the year and a half that we've been a team is become more operational ourselves. To be totally honest, I was not an operational professional before I owned the ops team. And what I realized over the past year and a half is I am a really operational person. I think in the past year, we've really gotten all of our internal systems and tools in place that we own, right? The next step or the next mission for us is to help the rest of the organization think more operationally, right? Because
Gotcha.
we're here to support them in a lot of ways. And I think we still have a little bit of difference of operational modes, if that makes sense. And I'm sure marketers are listening to me can get a sense for other teams that they work with that might not be as operationally minded, right? So it's really to align teams around the operations and the data at the end of the day. So we're all reaching towards the same goals with the same resources and looking at the results through the same lens.
Really, really good. Last question to sort of wrap up a little bit the thing where I would like to learn, how you have been reflecting a little bit, about the time that you've been spending at Chartbeat. And you mentioned you moved from a sort of non-operational, professional way of working to a very operationally driven one. If you would rejoin Chartbeat today, or let's put it different, if you would go back to the day when you joined Chartbeat, what would be one advice that you would give yourself?
That's a great question. I would have advised myself to look at the data sooner. I think it took me a long time to realize, and it's funny because we're a data company, and I think sometimes you forget to take your own medicine, if that makes sense, right? You're so focused on making sure your customers appreciate the value of data. As I mentioned, some of our customers are now me, right? They're in similar roles, and it's funny how you can lose that perspective. And I wish I was much more data savvy earlier on, because I think it would have just helped keep me a bit more oriented in the right direction.
Got you. That's very, very cool. Very, very cool. Thanks a lot for, spending your valuable time with us here at Pathmark Presents, giving us a bit of an insight on how you're thinking about, qualification, conversion on the websites, the full-blown system that you've been working on, and it sounds like looking to even develop further and improve, and also your personal learnings in that journey. So, Ollie, thanks for being part of the show, and thanks for being part of this episode today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.